Executive Committee, 11:30. That's call order. We do have one citizen that showed up today for comments, and I'm going to allow her to speak for 3 minutes or less. She indicates you need 2.5 minutes, but since she's here today, I will allow her to speak. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Chair, for this extraordinary opportunity to speak in front of this board. My name is Carol Maher. I'm a resident of Des Moines and a year-round bicyclist. I'm also what some people call a PETA, which would be a pain in the, when it comes to bike and pedestrian safety. On July 31st of this year, as well as January 29th of this year, a pedestrian was killed in the 4300 block of Northwest 2nd Street, which is just north of the Des Moines border in Polk County, on a street that is handled by Iowa DOT. In both instances, the victim, who is dead, was pretty much blamed for their behavior. The area was not well lit, and the pedestrian was wearing dark clothing. Another one, the area was not well lit and it was raining. So she shouldn't have been walking. But there's no sidewalks. There is a goat path along there where it shows you that people do walk along this road. I don't know if any of you have visited the site yet. I did visit the site after the first death in February. I would hope that the representative of Polk County and Iowa DOT would do the same. You'll find that the speed limit is 45 miles per hour. There's no shoulder in most of it, thus the goat path. There's no dark bus line. So I'm not sure how pedestrians are supposed to use this street. The sheriff will tell you they shouldn't use the street. So how are they supposed to get from point A to point B in this part of our area? It's easy to blame the victim because guess what? They can't speak for themselves because they're dead. As I said, it's a 45 mile per hour speed limit, 4-lane, no shoulder. I asked what Polk County and Iowa DOT is doing besides blaming the victim. What was the driver doing? Were they speeding? Were they on the cell phone? Were they distracted? Were they wearing dark clothing? Please get something out there. There are interim measures you can take, like the city of Des Moines did when Emma Campos was killed on April 28th in 2022 outside of East High School. They took immediate temporary measures to make the intersection and the crossings safe for students from Hyatt Middle School and East High School. And now their CIP plan is putting in permanent measures for safety. I call on you to please, how many people have to die in this stretch of roadway? Rather than projecting year-over-year traffic fatalities, as Iowa does, we need to consider people over cars on our streets. I ask that you really think of the victims and their families in this instance, rather than the trucks and the cars that are required and allowed to go at high speeds. Thank you.
Carol, thank you for your comments. We do have, as you noticed, DOT rep and supervisor online. Do they have your phone number to be able to reach out to you and visit on this subject more, or do you want to provide that?
I can provide it. Want me to say it out loud?
Well, it's up to you if you want to say it out loud.
I can give you my card.
You want me to
Sure, yeah.
technique?
Shelby, can you pass that along to Supervisor Van?
Yeah,
Forward that information to me.
For these projects to understand the whole situation. Here's my number. Oh.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to our second item, which is an approval of the agenda. Second. Moved by Von Grant, second by Polk City. Discussion on the agenda. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Number three, the vote approval of the July meeting minutes. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Von Durant, second by West Des Moines. Any discussion on meeting minutes from July? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. July meeting minutes are approved. Up next, we have a consent and vote on the July financial statement. We're going to turn it over to Dylan and make a vote.
I think everything we said was good in order and we approved it. We didn't really convene.
Right, the
Nothing
finance
really
committee
changed.
isn't scheduled to meet until next week, but we sent it out ahead of time. I think we got heard back from most everybody that they were.
Any questions? Now, entertain a motion.
A second.
Second by Mayor Both on the Moines. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, July financial statements are approved. Up next, we have a presentation and optional vote on governance assessment and human capital. Yes.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Excited to be here in front of everyone today with the draft of the Governance Insights Report. We have been sharing information along the way of the research we've been collecting through our process. So wanted to have a chance to share with you all of the information compiled and the recommendations in bringing all of that together. One of the unique things with this report, as we walk through the overview today, that makes this innovative is we are, in sharing the recommendations, wanting you to give your insight as the executive committee in how we shape the action and the implementation. So I'm going to give you that teaser as we go into the overview of the report. So talking about the report, goal today is to get your insight, suggestions, and recommendations, and then we'll talk about next steps. Everything is positioned as we go through this today to be ready for review and approval by the policy committee next week. And then in following along, I do have the draft report. Everybody grabbed a copy off the table. So the slides follow through along with the report. So just a reminder, a ton of research has gone into this report. We did an analysis of the Des Moines area MPO, governance documents, internal structures, just lots of historical analysis. We looked at best practice comparatives, and then also, if you recall, we did a committee member survey to voting members of the policy committee as well. So to touch on the historical overview, the MPO was formed back in 1983 as the Des Moines Area Transportation Committee. And for the first 10 years, really focused their work in partnership with the city of Des Moines. It was in May of 1993 that the restructure happened to form the Des Moines Area MPO as it exists today. And in 1993 was when the MPO started hiring the first staff and undertaking more aggressive regional projects. And then between 1993 and now, there have been 6 more amendments to the actual MPO agreement. Some key themes through the amendments: name change, addition of members, expanded purpose, updating the voting parameters, modernizing of the document language, policies, and practices. And I know I'm going through this kind of quickly because I want to get to research findings. So if there's any questions, please stop me. And then some interesting notes about MPO funding, kind of shifting away just from fundamental aspects about looking at kind of structure of governance. These were key things that stood out to me in the research that I think it's easy to kind of forget about when you're thinking about governance. But since 1991, well, thinking about $2 million is what the MPO was managing in 1991, 12 million in 2013. So today, $19 million is what the MPO is managing now. And then when you think since 1983, nearly $500 million is what's been awarded since the inception. Those are pretty big numbers. So cool when you think about the evolution of the MPO. Now, as I click to the next slide, you're going to see columns and really small font. So, giving you a visual here. I clicked it really fast. In the first appendix in the report, which I did not print with this copy, I am laying out a design here to capture all of the amendments that have happened with the MPO and the changes so that you can see how the agreement has evolved over the years. So this will be a quick reference sheet for you so you can track your evolution, kind of how it's happened on paper. So you'll be able to see what amendment has done and what changes were tracked in that amendment. Does that make sense as I say that? So this will be an appendix in the document. So then as we did the best practice comparatives, there were 4 partners that we looked at that provide MPO services, Nebraska, Kansas, Metro Orlando, and then the Metro Ohio area. And then we had a regional best practice partner, the Metro Waste Authority, that we took a look at. Again, those overviews are all in the document, so you can see the about each of those organizations. And then I know you have all seen kind of our initial spreadsheet of all the questions we asked in that interview and the responses to each of those questions from each of the partners that we interviewed. But here are the summarized findings of each of those conversations together. So key themes that we recognize. For most of these organizations that they have used transportation to bring them together, but they have found in doing that, that their regional work, the benefit of the regional thinking has created other opportunities for their organizations. What they recognize is that they have one table for convening a lot of conversations. So whether they offer more services or not isn't what I'm speaking to, but they appreciate having the opportunity to have a place for regional conversation. They recognize that they have consistencies in their processes, which is a huge benefit to their work. And because of that, they're able to build trust with one organization and have one team to work with and a better opportunity to connect regional planning issues together. So that was one of the themes from the conversations. They also find that their governance structures have found effectiveness in being inclusive by using committees, by engaging board members of the work, by keeping their membership benefits top of mind. A lot of these organizations really focus on providing a return on investment regularly, and then making the best use of everyone's time by clarifying all of their expectations. So making sure everyone knows what to expect from their organizations. Engagement for the organizations often hinge on their relationships and trust with the organizations, and this was a key piece for their leaders. Their leaders navigate tensions and the political nature by having strong relationships with each of their board members. And then clear vision and strategy was something that all of the organizations talked about. Knowing that they have alignment, they're able to drive their discussion, common understanding, buy-in, and having a clear definition of the why they're doing the work that they're doing from their vision and strategy. 2 final points, and Dylan and I talked about this morning. Some of the organizations that we talked with serve both urban and rural. And here in the metro, it's kind of that thought process of big cities and small cities, or how we kind of put our thought around that. In navigating the size, a lot of these communities really focus on consensus, working with micro strategies. So not having to have everyone around the table in every conversation, but they approach things on who benefits from a project and having folks around the table in multiple projects. So the right people at the right table at the right time makes them effective. Be more intentional about showcasing their work, bringing investments back to everyone, and then celebrating the fact that everyone participating is different. And I'll come back to that point here in the recommendations. And then the last piece is the importance of transparency and financial reporting, and the role of the financial team was something that every partner talked about. So I'll pause for a second as you kind of process all of these themes. Is there anything specifically that stands out to you as I share that?
I think probably, comment on the rural versus big, small considerations. I think that has, my short time here at the MPO has always been kind of a little bit of a rub, so it's nice to see what other MPOs are doing and how they have dedicated staff, how that may be an option to be a full service for all size communities.
I'm gonna say it again, we'll come back to that. Okay. There were innovative ideas, and again, these are spelled out in more detail in the report. And again, we touched on these in our last meeting, but Matt has shared some great ideas around having a transportation improvement fee. Mark was really proud of their financial practices and the role of the finance team. Metro Orlando uses a very strong committee system, and then the Ohio organization leads their internship program. So some really cool ideas that they share that's a little bit unique to the Des Moines area. Yeah. And just a reminder, as I super click. Okay, just a reminder of what that spreadsheet will look like, summarizing all of the. So the survey data, as you flip through the report with me, the survey data starts on page 7. Two things that I want to make sure as you look at the survey data. There were questions in the survey where we provided options on certain questions where you could checkbox ideas, but every question allowed an opportunity for you to share open comments, open thoughts, any ideas or innovations you wanted to share. And then there were also questions that were just open comment questions themselves. When you look in the report, any comment that was shared as part of the report is in here, unedited. So as you look at the comments and general themes, even as I share them here, kind of compiled, the comments are in the report the way that you share them with me. So we received 19 responses. You can see how they're noted here. And the primary components of the survey were focused around meeting logistics, the exec committee, membership, committee considerations, and then there were some closing thoughts that were shared. So as we looked at meeting logistics, we really wanted to explore, are we meeting at the right time, right number of meetings, making it easy for folks to participate. And what the survey shared is that folks absolutely appreciate the hybrid option. So thank you to those who are online with us today. And that the majority of folks appreciate the current meeting date and time, while there are still some folks that wish we could meet in the morning or in the afternoon, but majority still appreciate where we're at today. And absolute majority feels that we are meeting the right number of times per year. So I feel like we've validated our current meeting time and process, if that feels good to the executive. So we asked some questions specifically about the executive committee. I'm going to ask you to bear with me here as I share this feedback with you. There were 6 questions in total that we asked. These first 2 questions that I shared with you, the executive committee is structured appropriately and that we're doing the right work to make MPO meetings efficient and effective. We had 2 of the 6 questions where we had consensus as a committee. And you can see neutral, agree, and disagree, and were the options on this question, along with being able to share some comments. I'm noting the first that were structured appropriately as being consensus because there was only 5% or roughly 6% that disagreed with that. So I'm assuming the neutral is leaning to the positive. And then clearly the second point here that we're doing the right work to support the MPO meetings. This was the one executive committee question that had the most positive affirmative response. So consensus on those 2. The next 4 questions were a little bit different. So as you look at where the responses fall with these questions, they're all about equally dispersed in neutrality, I think is a good way to say this. So the work of the executive committee at times extends beyond what I would view the role to be. 35% agree, 35% are neutral, 29% disagree. The work that the committee feels redundant to the policy committee, I'm not sure of their purpose. 40%, 41% feel it's not redundant, 35% feel it is redundant, 23% feel neutral about it. I'm comfortable with the work, 47% neutral, 29, and so on and so forth. I won't go through all of these. So there was a question that it left me with that I'll share with you now, and then we'll come back and look at the recommendations at the end. The question that I left with in looking at this, and then after our last executive committee discussion, was how the MPO defines neutral. Because there's kind of three ways that you can look at that. And when you think about how you define neutral, I think a lot of that is shaped on how you perceive your potential. And so I'll pause there and let you think about that comment while we keep looking at the survey data. So I'm going to keep going, but I want you to have that thought in mind. Benefits of membership. Clearly, majority of folks at the table appreciate having a voice, definitely appreciate the regional thinking, absolutely want attention to partners being in the discussion, want to see new ideas from the new executive director, and appreciate being solutions-based. And then as I move into the next phase of the survey, there's a couple of things that I want to balance here for you too. This slide is especially important because this was a checkbox slide. So this is a place where everybody could choose their ideas based on options that we provided. A lot of times I'll get asked a question as I'm analyzing data in a survey. If people are providing open comments, is the same person providing the same comment on different questions all the way through and generating a theme? And sometimes that does happen. But a question like this validates the validity of a theme because you can see the majority of survey respondents are showing you that having a voice at the table is important, regional thinking is important, and including partners in discussions is important. So as you see some of the themes elevated through open comment, it's been validated in both ways. So committee considerations, I'll smile a little bit as I say this. We asked the question, do you feel the MPO could benefit from a more robust committee structure? 63% roughly of voting members said yes. And there were 4 comments that still said no more meetings, please. So I'm giving that to you saying, yes, majority says, please engage us in committees, but we're recognizing 4 people said no more meetings. So. And then talking about membership, what are the obstacles for work? Really important to acknowledge that the issues are different depending on the city size, and sometimes it's hard to prioritize or vocalize the need equally. 75% of survey respondents shared that thought. Again, this was a checkbox question, and these were the 2 most elevated priorities in that checkbox question. And then competition for funding the policy committees. It impacts. We moved into the open box questions where people were able to just share their thoughts. So again, if you're following in the report with me, you can see the comments directly. These are on page 9. What makes the MPO unique? There were 3 themes that really came through that question. Do people have equal voice? And there were 2 comments, or actually I take that back, there were 4 comments. And it was like for every comment that said we have an equal voice, there was a comment that said, I don't know that I have an equal voice. There were great comments about regional planning and support. And then there were a lot of comments when you think about what makes the MPO unique. Nothing unknown, not applicable, no comment, no opinion, or I've served on the Des Moines Partnership and that's similar. So there were 7 comments that were neutral about the MPO, if I say it that way, right? And again, I don't think that's a negative criticism of the MPO. I think it's expectation of, and Dylan and I talked about it this morning, if I say it this way, kind of the thought of we receive funding and we distribute funding and the expectation, right? Where can we improve? Member engagement, committee considerations, decision-making, and then there was kind of a pocket of, I don't have suggestions on where we could improve. And then this is another really important slide from the survey. We asked the question of services you would like more access to. And we had a good size list. Here were the top 5 responses. 50% of you would like more funding. But then the other thing is we think about the recommendations that you'll see here in a second. The next 4 top priorities for facilitation of intergovernmental conversations, technical support, development of plans, reports and studies, and then public outreach and community engagement. So keep that top of mind here. So what do we do with all of this information now? And this was a lot to process. And I know I'm giving this all to you now to process here in this minute that you're with me. To me, there were 2 kinds of buckets of thoughts or buckets of priorities. It felt like there were priorities to really help you support strengthening MPO governance. And then there's priorities to help you support moving into strategic planning. So things that you need to think about and prepare for strategically, and things that can strengthen you as a governing organization. Clearly, there is interest in how you leverage committees to support your work. A bit more reflection, I think, is needed for the executive committee. I don't think there's question here about your role or how you're designed, but maybe how you approach your work or how you engage others in the discussion with your work is a good thing for the executive committee to revisit. The second thing is figuring out how you engage topic or project-based committees to support the work of the MPO moving forward. There's an interest there. And some of these things I think work in tandem. The second priority I propose to you for your consideration is member engagement. How do you increase the connectivity between members with regard to regional transportation planning? Based on all of the feedback, it looks like there's opportunity to include more discussion about critical topics. So thinking about how you shape your agenda, how do you create that space for more discussion? Could it be different kinds of engagement with the work? Or could it include facilitating those intergovernmental conversations? So putting partners together strategically for projects. And then I bring you back to that neutral question. Member satisfaction. What does it mean? What does neutral mean for the MPO? And is it an opportunity for the MPO to be, and I have to say this carefully because I think in the survey, neutral was a positive response. But I think the question is there opportunity when you think of good to great? Is the MPO achieving or reaching all of the potential that you could for the region? So that was my question when I looked at that. So that's, as I asked that, is there an opportunity to be better? Not that you're not achieving that, but is there more you'd like to deliver to the region? And then what are your expectations? And are you? So I'll pause for a second. So my question to you is, you'll see in the report, as I share these priorities with you, I did not shape action steps. And the reason I didn't is because I feel like that needs to be a collaborative discussion with us. And I feel, or my recommendation to you is to also have that be a collaborative discussion, not only with the executive committee, but also with Dylan as the executive director. I gave the analogy as we talked about it today, kind of coming into this, if you think of all of the communities in the region kind of in the ocean with life preservers. Felt like when we started this process, that's where and I don't want to over dramatize this, but we were all kind of there together, floating together. And sometimes there would be a project that maybe we'd float out a little bit and then we'd bring everybody back together. And I think when we started this project, we thought that we would have like definitive answers to specific questions. But I think what happened through the course of the conversation is we realized that there's more questions we needed to ask to get the right answers, to be able to shape the strategies to move forward. So I feel like where we're at now is we have the right questions to ask to put everybody in the boat. So we can see the lighthouse, but we need to answer some really specific questions now to kind of move forward. So when you look at these pieces, those are the questions we need to ask. So how do the priorities strike you for governance?
When you have so much neutral, it is a lot more work needs to be to define how, because it is an opportunity to move them up. If you're neutral, you just don't know or don't understand. So I think, or have no feeling. So it's not saying you're doing well or you're not doing poor, but we've got to figure out how to move the neutral up. So from the governance standpoint, and all the questions are kind of is broader than just overall. Move more off the neutral.
Thanks, Brian.
Structure and stuff, it's something about happening. It's just a matter of how do we get more engagement.
I'm going to flip to the strategic priority suggestions, and then I'm going to circle back so you can see how the rest of this ties together. There were two things that really stood out from a strategy standpoint, because we know that strategic planning will likely be a next step for the MPO. Revisiting vision, mission, and guiding principles on the heels of what we learned from a lot of the partners. Perfect timing for an update on that, helping to create consistent agreements, and a really great point in that mission and vision right now really speaks to transportation system as opposed to leading the organization. So let me say that better. The current mission vision for the Des Moines area MPO addresses mission and vision of the transportation system as opposed to the organization. And so it's, I think, difficult for the partners to align to how you lead the work because it's just focused on the system. And then you look at the next point of shaping possibilities. How do you stay relevant for all of your members, celebrate the differences, ask some critical questions to determine what the needs are, and adapt as needed while staying aligned with vision and mission? Those pieces kind of tie together, right? As you evolve, and it kind of goes back to all of those, thinking about how the MPO has grown and changed over the years, a lot has changed. Your communities have changed. And has there been time and space at this table to really have the conversation to say, we are all different, we all have different needs, that's okay, and what do those needs need to be? What do we want them to be? And have that conversation to inform mission and vision. So being empowered to ask the question. And at the end of the day, if you validate that what you're doing today is perfect for what you need, then you move forward, you can align your mission and vision. But there may be opportunity or ideas that other members bring forward I think, Doug, when you brought up at the last meeting, the question of assessing the concrete, am I saying that right? And we talked in a lot of different ways about this, that, and the other thing, but even knowing if that was a possibility, is that a question you could ask, right? I don't know that everybody knows what questions they could potentially ask the MPO for.
But just to offer my 2 cents in hearing this, that's the biggest thing that stands out to me is understanding what is our potential and do we want to establish what that potential is. We've been one way for a lot of years, and I think a lot of people look to the MPO as the funding organization. That's fine. That's a really important role. So the question is, while we're already here and understanding we're going to do that funding piece anyway, is there more that we can do? And not saving more outside of transportation, just even within transportation, what else is on the menu of options? And that's something that we need to figure out, and that will help dictate what does our governance look like, who's at the table, what do the committees look like. All those other things kind of are predicated on what's our agreement on what that menu of options is.
So do you see more direction towards how do we better define our regional routes and activity and?
Or they're very, to mirror our example, are there very technical
Right.
aspects that we want to be getting involved with too, that
That
have
commonality.
implications on personnel and everything else. That's really a question we need to answer.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll chime in here a little bit. So I had an opportunity to connect with Dylan recently, and we talked about this item specifically. And I think hindsight, I think it absolutely would have been something we would have considered to use the MPO and retaining a third party. So I think maybe going forward, I think that is a viable space that the MPO can serve. I think maybe showcasing some examples of different types of services to the community or in discussion here. And then, if you have an opportunity to participate in some type of project, maybe sharing again with the policy committee what the work was and what the end result was to showcase that and kind of sell your services might help to increase awareness and spur additional requests. And ultimately, at the end of the day, for me, it was just kind of out of sight, out of mind.
Right, if you don't even know that's.
Well, that's what I'm saying, that's a lot. For, how do you get what you can, what's available?
And and someone has to make that decision. I don't want to dismiss it. We can offer to you what we can do, what our skill set is, but it's got to be a decision of what we do. So maybe the next step is with the idea of committees is on the whole committee that what is that menu of options look like? Present that back to.
I think this is part of the question is that I think answering the question of even if that's something the MPO wants to do, it's like a question. Okay. So what are those kinds of services? Do we want to do things like that? And then what are the kinds of things that could be done? But
Yeah, and that's, again, not to say we have to do it either. It's just, I want to make sure that we're providing the opportunity to ask the question of ourselves. And it probably will change. It'll evolve as we evolve.
But I think that's what continues to kind of drive things back to neutral, right? What is the possibility? Are they doing what we should be doing? And is that what potential is?
Or even know. I mean, when you have people turn over as we do appointments, it's not like, every election, there's some new people or whatever. So the continuity to find out and have a clear direction gets confusing, I'm sure, for everybody, get us all up to speed or whatever. So it's that ongoing change that, and how do you, because everybody comes in with a different idea of what their roles are and what we should expect from you. So it's how do we make sure that we're all pretty clear on at the very beginning. So
Like what Kathy pointed out, when the mission and vision is focused on the system and each one of us access the system
in a
differently,
different way.
we fight for different pieces as opposed to mission and vision of the MPO itself, the region. We're focusing again on the system. So I wrote that down. I think that's probably the most pressing thing we're going to have to move forward with is working on goal setting, which I think unfortunately we've all been dragging feet on knowing it's coming. But I think it's probably time we start moving that direction and try to get the focus on the MPO itself, right? It's a system, and we have different users. We have a pedestrian cyclist user here, that is brought up a concern. Have, we focus mostly on automobile and infrastructure needs. Trying to change the mission and vision to reflect the MPO, so important pressing issue we have in the next year or two.
Yeah, one thing that I think maybe you should consider as an organization is, each of our communities are focused on our own transportation systems, to your point, Mark. I think we, as individual communities, we are kind of judges of our own design. Perhaps outside influence or input might be helpful for the individual communities. Are the individual communities fulfilling their goal? Maybe not even necessarily that, but are there different ideas or enhancement opportunities for the communities that are blind spots for the communities? And I think the MPO might be able to serve that type of a value to provide that input and new ideas.
Thinking kind of the two buckets of priorities. Priorities to support governance, thinking back into committees, engagement and satisfaction. Thinking about the research. Does that feel like the right fit as the executive committee? You think about sharing this with the policy committee next week.
What was your question again? I'm sorry, can you say that?
So if we should is this the right approach that we should share with the full committee? The full committee. Get input from them too. I think they need to see it. I think sometimes, a lot of times they think, well, exec does everything, we don't have say, so we just go along with it.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
We have this as an optional vote, which we could just move it on the policy, but I think if we can vote on this as a recommendation for the policy committee, like we need more time. Simply allow it to be on the policy committee agenda and have discussion too, and without a recommendation, which.
I think it would be helpful in this case, because we're really talking about shaping the whole group.
I agree. I mean, I'm.
So this needs to be presented, so there could be better, even more discussion or ideas come up that could help shape than what we would do as the executive committee. So I would say, I would present it to the full committee side. But, I think they should have an opportunity so that they can get more engaged and see what their engagement is.
I agree. I'd like to Robert reflect on it, and we'll find just kind of taking it all in. I want to see it, and I think it'd be good though for the full committee to have the presentation. And maybe have some initial discussion, absorb it for a month, then come back
Again. I mean, right now, so that really you can get some, instead of just sitting there and ahead of time, but we can get more discussion.
Yeah.
It would be, again, I present it to the full policy and then let them come back the following month.
Yeah. I think it lends itself to transparency as well. There are some constructive comments, I guess, in regard to how exec is formulated and some concerns. So sharing in varnished information, I think lends itself to that.
Do you guys see any benefit to emailing this report out to all community board meetings?
I think it's great, and I think I would also encourage, as much in-person participation as possible.
Right.
Again, that's kind of goes to part of what we're talking about, but the more people are on Zoom, we're being in the room.
There's better discussion, I believe. That's
Exactly.
We could send it out with the agenda, but we can highlight in there, case it shouldn't be.
Right, I would, yeah.
Why don't we just, if you want to send it to my email.
Or even
there,
send it as a
just separately. And
This
say,
is-
Chair wants you to review this, please encouragement to be here in person because of the gravity of the discussion.
Let me ask my question a little bit differently. Do you like the priorities that are in here addressing them? Do you feel like it's a good next step? Is it the right discussion to have? Right questions to ask.
I think so. I mean, I think, when I think back to this, we boiled this organization down and one of the main job functions that we have is disseminate content. And the notion of equality, the only comment that we had was in regard to the inner workings of executive policy, not necessarily there was overall concern with quality. So I think we ought to feel good about that. I think that we're accomplishing job number one. And then it's just the details from there.
I'll ask the same question about the priorities to support strategic. Thank you. Do those feel like the right priorities? Do you feel like we're missing anything kind of at this point? Part of what you need to think about when you're processing this information is this is going to be a little bit of a different conversation for the MPO because this is more philosophical as opposed to practical, right? This is very different than just getting the funding and doing the project. This is, thinking about that vision and approaching the work together. So, but I think it will position you for more success. Any questions for me? All right. Thank you.
All right, we'll leave that as a presentation. We'll move on to item number 6, which will be vote on the MPO population adjustments and joint resolution with first and
Thank you. So as you might recall, earlier this year in January, the MPO extended its metropolitan planning area boundary of MPA into areas that were formerly served. So with this new expanded MPO boundary, the Iowa DOT has requested that the MPO confirm its new population will serve so that the Iowa DOT can update some funding formulas. So to provide a little bit of background, at a minimum, the MPO's MPA metropolitan planning area boundary has to include the census designated urban areas. So by default, the Iowa DOT uses the population from those designated urban areas for its calculations. But historically, the MPO and SERPA boundaries expanded beyond those areas, and hence we have to do a bit of a population adjustment. So MPO staff has prepared the population adjustments for start of the map on the screen. So everything in green is the 2020 census urban area that comprises both the Des Moines and Polk City urban areas. The combined population of both is 547,861. And then everything in gray, covered by the black borderline, is the MPO's new expanded boundary. And using a population from the 2020 census, everything in gray has a population of 583,135. And so the difference between the green and gray areas is about 35,274. So this population might have gone to SERPA, but is now in the MPO bound. So MPO staff discussed and reviewed the calculations and methodology with SERPA staff, and SERPA staff had no objections to the numbers or methodology. So for next steps, after the MPO reviews and approves the population numbers and joint resolution this month, SERPA staff will do the same thing next month. And once both organizations have approved the numbers joint resolution, it will be sent over to Iowa DOT, and then they will use it to update the funding formulas. So with that, I'll be happy to take any questions you might have. Otherwise, MPO staff recommends approval of the population adjustments and the joint resolution.
Any questions? All right, entertain a motion.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Moved by Moines, second by Urbandale. Any further discussion? Yeah, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Approved. Moving on to item 7, report an optional vote on carbon reduction program funding process. Max,
Thank you. So back when the SCBG funding was awarded earlier this year, an award was made to DART
for 3.6 million in CRP funding. And at that time, in their recommendation with the policy requested that staff look into how to develop a CRP process that would open up the funding to the rest of the communities and get that process going as quickly as possible. So we're back here today to report on how that update that process is going. So we put together a subcommittee to review the process. That committee met back on May 16th. They probably had a little over an hour long discussion about how this process should look. There's a few items there on the screen that kind of hit the highlights of what we discussed at that meeting. Trying to make the process as simple and straightforward as possible while leaving it open to the widest variety of eligible projects as well. They also wanted to try to keep this process separate from the SCBG process. There were a couple of good reasons for this. One, it would eliminate some of the workload as far as submitting applications all at the same time on our SCBG timeline. And then also, if the community were to submit their CRP funding and their application is not successful, that would allow them to then submit under the SCBG program. So it felt like that was a good reason to look at separating those two timelines. Using carbon reduction as a main criteria to review these projects. That was another thing that was discussed at that subcommittee. And then there was some desire to try to spread the CRP funding around based on a population type formula. So we looked into that with Iowa DOT. We can't really pursue that option because it does not meet their requirements. They have sub-allocation requirements. We can't sub-allocate to communities. So based on that, we can't really approach it in that fashion. So staff spent about a month or so developing a new application process for the CRP funding. Really tried to kind of emulate the STBG application we currently have. As far as trying to keep it simple, I think this application maybe is right under 20 questions. Most of those questions are checkbox, fill in the blank type short answer questions. So not a real extensive or hard application to fill out. And then to address kind of that carbon reduction item, we found that the Federal Highway Administration has carbon calculators on their website. We felt like there was some really good reasons to look at using these calculators. First of all, it's an existing methodology. It's already out there. It's being used for other things. We don't have to try to create some new methodology. The calculators also have different project categories, which fits well into what we're trying to do to open up that program to different things. So we'll be able to calculate carbon reduction for a bike project versus an adaptive traffic control system versus some kind of congestion traffic flow type project. And then you can compare those kind of projects across each other and have a consistent methodology. So staff's recommendation was to go with those federal highway calculators. Staff's proposed timeline, this is based on pending approval from this board, but looking at getting those applications out as quickly as possible after approval. So later this month, the applications could be posted on the website and then have those due back in September. This would allow us to get those applications in front of the funding subcommittee in October, allow them to develop a recommendation and then bring it back to the executive policy in November for approval of those CRP awards. So we sent all these materials and this proposed timeline to the subcommittee to review further. The majority of that subcommittee was happy with what the process and timeline looked like. We did have a couple of concerns that were shared. One of our representatives questioned whether or not this process would allow all members to get a portion of the CRP funding. We discussed the fact that we can't sub-allocate, so we can't guarantee that every community would get funding, but this process certainly does open up the ability for everyone to apply and potentially get that CRP funding. Additionally, there was a suggestion that we run sample applications through the carbon calculators prior to opening up this application process. That is certainly something that we can consider. What I would note is that if we do that, it is likely to push out that timeline. We don't have all the information we need in past STBG applications to be able to kind of test some of those projects. So if we were going to do that, we'd have to reach back out to our members, request additional information. It would take more your community staff time as well as our staff time. And like I said, this is something we could consider But just be aware that it would push that timeline out. Based on all that, staff's recommendation to the subcommittee was to approve the proposed process. They did vote to approve it and move it on to this committee. Maybe I've got one more slide in there. So our recommendation to them was to approve the process as it was presented. The tech committee voted on it. They also voted to move forward to exec committee as it stands. There was one nay vote from the city of Pleasant Hill that I would note. That's what we have for you. I'm happy to take any questions you have.
I do. So I recall you saying that the main criteria was the scoring component of the actual reduction of carbon footprint. So I'm thinking with that in combination of the allocation amongst communities. Is there an approach or a thought process on if two communities are fairly similar, or maybe one is just below but it's never been granted funding? Is there a component or consideration of selection of projects based upon equitable distribution in addition to the actual carbon reduction?
I will say that the way that we're envisioning this, ultimately these applications go before the funding subcommittee. They review them, they develop a recommendation, goes to policy for final. But the way I think we're envisioning this would happen is that the carbon reduction is one item that subcommittee is going to be able to look at when they're making their recommendation. It's not the only thing that they're going to be considering. They will be considering things like, just like they do with SCBG, they'll be looking at who's been awarded in the past and try to keep some of that regional balance in there. Again, it's not something we can we didn't feel like we could mandate from a staff perspective as far as what the process would look like, but if it works similar to SPG, that's what we're envisioning.
In other words, we're not recommending that you just take the carbon reduction score on that and go down the list.
Yeah, I was going to mention this. If it is that black and white, then why even have us? Let's just bring the scoring components, bring it to policy. But I understand. Thank you.
Zach, we can't sub-allocate, but can we block applicants? For example, darts, if they've already taken a third of it. Could we request they not apply for any? Because I would assume they would calculate quite well on the carbon reduction plan and scoring criteria.
Yeah. I think from a staff perspective, we don't feel like we can tell DART that they can't apply. What committee members
they've already taken a third of our money and they didn't have to apply for it.
Still part of the organization.
But that's ultimately the funding subcommittee makes a recommendation and policy approves it. So if policy does not want to give more money to DART, then that's the decision the policy is able to make.
There's 3 levels of
Well, I just, we, without any criteria whatsoever, we cut ourselves in half or a third. But they can apply and we can discuss it at a later date. Just want to make, that's where some of the concern has been historically, and I think they will probably fare quite well in the carbon reduction scoring calculation. As long as people are aware of that, we can report. Just a theoretical question. Can't sub-allocate, but
I was just gonna say, if they score really well, much higher than anybody else, and they're doing what this money is for, shouldn't we be following what's gonna reduce carbon the most?
we could skip all,
Since that's what
give
it's
them
for.
all the money.
I'm not saying we don't know if they're gonna score, I'm just saying, I think what this bill was for is carbon reduction, am I wrong?
That's it. The main purpose.
So whatever is the mechanism to reduce carbon the most within our metro area or our service area should be what we should be looking at. And I don't know how anybody's gonna score, there could be another project out there that could even be better and more efficient, but I don't think we should shortchange something that is moving the needle further for what the reason we even got the money.
It's like this signalization optimization. I mean, that can reduce, but it won't fare well against mass transportation. But until we get into the details of it, I mean, we will have discussion on later.
I think we trust the process. And so we putting process in place is what we want.
And I only bring that up because we've had several communities ask me that because of how things originated with doors. So I asked that. We know we can address later. There is some concern out there by several communities.
I think dovetails into my earlier question. I think it's, let the program run. Let's take a look at it, see what the scoring components are. And then I think the approving bodies need to consider this distribution of funds.
If I may, and if you go through the list of the carbon reduction plan, there are a multitude of projects qualified. So we're kind of limiting it. I want to read something in the record. The Iowa Department of Transportation Carbon Reduction Program 2024 specifically recognized that one size does not fit all locales. As such, statewide strategies are not prioritized at the local level. Each MPO is able to focus the strategies, plural, strategies, that are priorities in their areas for their planning and programming efforts. The process outlined by staff seems backwards to me and places the funding committee in a precarious situation of making value and priority judgments without the criteria and priorities that should be made by the policy committee on the front end before project applications are submitted for review and scoring. Using the carbon reduction program scoring sheet alone does not take other factors into consideration. The funding committee recommendations will be locked only to the emissions reductions, and if other funding recommendations are made, they will only be seen as arbitrary judgments in the absence of policy preference criteria. These types of decisions, including the recent award to DART, have been a point of contention among MPO members. You should ask the membership for their priorities and interests amongst the wide range of eligible projects. We could evaluate each strategy and category against our priorities as a metric. Using the emission scoring exclusively without testing will yield an unknown outcome and likely prioritize types of projects that have already taken 40% of the funding. In the absence of our own criteria, there are established priorities: safety, equity, climate and sustainability, workforce development, job quality, and wealth creation as described in the United States Department of Transportation Strategic Plan and applicable to the Carbon Reduction Grant Programming. Carbon Reduction Program, U.S. DOT, Federal Highway Administration Memorandum, Implementation Guidance, dated April 21st of 2022, addressing the policy for bipartisan infrastructure law and eligibility for the Carbon Reduction Program. Safety, prioritizing safety in all investments and projects, including complete street standards. Transit flex. Funds from CRP can be flexed to federal transit authority programs to fund transportation projects, which we have already made a 40% commitment of our total CRP funds. Equity, ensure consideration of using CRP funds for projects that proactively address racial equity, workforce development, economic development, and remove barriers for opportunity. Climate change and stability, sustainability. Federal Highway Administration encourages the advancement of projects that address climate change and sustainability. Present an approach to reducing economy-wide net greenhouse gas pollution by 2030. Resilience of transportation infrastructure by helping communities prepare for hazards such as wildfires, floods, storms, and droughts that are exacerbated by climate change. We are letting a single available federal scoring table, which has not been tested, drive our policy, which is the opposite of good planning and our public policy development. We have missed the policy committee related discussion and direction as part of this decision-making matrix. Do we have a metro-wide priority or urgent need for the use of carbon reduction program funds? Are we okay with emissions taking precedence over all other interests rather than multiple category scoring to equalize the projects and priorities? Are there policy considerations or political realities that have these bearing on specific use or non-use of carbon reduction program funds? Will we obligate all the current available funding, or will we hold back some amount of the funds for future annual awards? So I don't see the urgency. We've had this money available to us for a couple of years already. Pushing this another month or two to take in some of these other scoring criteria that are listed here, talking about safety and equity, All those things should be a part of that decision on how those funds are allocated. And it is within federal and what we have received from the DOT at the state level on the planning efforts for this money.
What did the committee look at? Did they not look at all?
To that point, the carbon reduction program committee, when we first met, that was the starting point, is are there priorities in the region that we want to focus? And the direction they had was keep it as open as possible, so that we're not targeting just safety or just
Right.
electric vehicles or what have you. Keep it as open as possible. So this was our solution to keep it as open as possible. Is any type of project can apply. And then in order to compare those different projects from an emission standpoint, the calculator seemed the best way to go about it.
But we
That's it.
have these other criteria that are available to us and recommended by federal and state on safety and equity, and why aren't they a part of that matrix?
Because the committee actually said that they thought this was, am I missing
I
something?
think what we heard
That's
is
the
a
criteria.
safety-related project that can demonstrate reduced emissions can
Right.
still apply.
Right, but won't score well because we're
Well,
only looking
yeah,
at the
but you don't
emission
know
stack.
that. You don't know how it's gonna score until you run it through it.
That's why you do the testing that nobody
No,
wants
I
to
mean,
do
but
in
that's
this
why you
room.
have a system, you have a mechanism in place already that scores it. And you have criteria you brought up that there'll be flexibility to look at it, so I don't know. We haven't had a group already look at it, so I would say, I would recommend that we approve what's been brought forward.
If I can make one other, we're simply bringing to you implementing what that committee wanted to see, and then the technical committee. This group, also be totally free to change it, and we'll be supportive of that, and we'll provide guidance, because I don't entirely disagree that it'd be great to identify a key priority for the region or two and focus around that. That's just not the direction we received from our member communities.
Yeah, I mean, if there was a change, I mean, but at this point. I would say I would move to approve what the committee took the time to look at. We talk about we're trying to develop committees within our organization. So, I guess you would support it or not, right?
So policy has no bearing on how we move these things forward.
The policy committee,
I'm talking about policy in general.
Well, I think we move this on, policy can still amend it next
Right.
week. We can amend it. So, we're in the middle of, we can get a second, we can have further discussion since there's a motion. If not, then I guess the motion will die. Second, Mayor Bosens. Moving second, all right, we can move on. I think carrying on, I think the policy, we have full control. Next week, then if they want to add in the criteria that you've mentioned, definitely can do that. It's just right now we're recommending, there's been a motion to recommend this. We may call these votes. Frankly, as the chair, I don't consider these executive votes to carry any weight really other than as a recommendation to policy committee is the governing committee that finalizes it. It was just a recommendation of small group committee. And if the small group feels this, we want to move forward, we've been moving and seconded, and policy goes in a different direction. I think that's the beauty of our political process. So you've got some time to talk to fellow membership if you like.
The only consideration that I have to change any wording this is rather than saying the main, that the carbon reduction is the main criteria. I could see a change to is a key criteria. I think there also needs to be consideration of equity. And then secondly, I'm not opposed at all to taking this to policy committee. I think it should, that's where it should go. I think it could be are transparent about discussion about some of the different ideas within the conversation that lends itself.
Lynn, to your
Yeah.
point,
Go ahead online, Matt.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as I'm reading through this material, it sounds like this initially the process was directed by the policy committee who asked staff to develop a process. And so here, the process is unfolding consistent with the policy committee wanted. It's coming to us for kind of review, but to the chair's point, it should go back to the policy committee, of which we're all a member, I think, and we can discuss it at that point. So it seems like we'd be kind of usurping the policy committee by trying to change something here. And I think I'm supportive of giving it back to the policy committee.
I am as well, and looking at the application, I think any criteria can be added by whoever applies for it. The criteria can be submitted and evaluated by.
It's the group that's scoring it that I'm concerned about, that we are putting them in a position of having to arbitrarily make decisions again without any solid facts behind it that are going to become very critical in the trying to keep this group together and organized. Now all of a sudden we've got different decisions being made and people are not going to be pleased. It's not going to help bridge and bring this group together again.
How many, $6 million left in this bucket approximately?
Yeah.
I mean, we're concerned about $6 million in one bucket. And how many millions of dollars do we allocate out via other committees every year?
20.
I think the other committees that committee that's reviewing SDG and everything else, they have to go through the same process. I don't think it's quite arbitrary, but they are put in a position, which all adults here, that's what we have to do, right?
But there's more criteria fixed in those programs, making those
And
decisions.
I guess that was gonna be my question is, would it make you feel more comfortable if we still say, and this is a question for the group, if we say carbon reduction is the key criteria, the main criteria, whatever verbiage we want to use, but do we also want to track what it's going to do for safety, congestion, these other things? That way we know here's congestion, or here's the carbon reduction, but also here's maybe some other benefits of the project that can be compared. It's still going to be up to that funding subcommittee to make a recommendation based on all of that, and try to compare a fleet replacement to all of those things that we get. It's all
Right, and that's really the point I was trying to make, trying to get some additional criteria in there to make this. Again, if we're talking about safe streets, we're talking about, safety, I mean. There seems to be an effort, we're only going to talk about doing traffic safety when it comes to our traffic safety grant, when that comes about. Where, when we look at things holistically, can we, if you will, magnify that use of money by not only are we dealing with carbon reduction, we're also providing more safety. We're actually doing something with the trail system. Whatever those things may be, the communities are wanting to push forward as potential projects, which are all eligible projects.
Yeah, again, I think we focused on the carbon because that's what that subcommittee said. It's going to be too hard to compare apples to apples, apples and oranges, I should say. Carbon is the one unifying thing. Let's just measure that. But I think it's very easy. We could add to the application either here's a couple of defined things, safety, congestion, whatever it might be, or just an open-ended, tell us what else this project will do. They will have bearing on what issues.
We have a motion and a second on it to vote, and this would only be a recommendation to the policy committee. So we do have the potential next week to add this additional criteria and have this identical discussion there. And if the majority of the policy committee wishes to do so, they may add that, provide staff the direction. So with that, unless there's additional conversation, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, recommendation is to move it on to the policy committee. Up next is a report on the comprehensive safety action plan, and Zach.
Thank you. Want to give you a quick update on the comprehensive city action plan. Our transmission safety committee met on July 23rd. They discussed a number of things at that meeting. The main things were how to prioritize project areas, not specific projects, but project areas. Setting a goal for the reduction of fatal and serious injury crashes, and then also looking at setting a target here for when those fatal and serious injury accidents would be met. The safety committee had a pretty lengthy discussion about this. There was a lot of good opinions shared on it. Ultimately, what recommended was that we do 0 fatal serious injury crashes by the year 2045. This aligns pretty closely with what other communities have already done. Des Moines did zero by 2040. In Dallas County, did zero by 2040 as well. So it's a little bit further out, but stays pretty consistent with what other communities in the region have already done. So we presented the safety committee's recommendations to the technical committee. They had a good discussion on it as well. They did not take any formal action, it was just an update to them. But I would say there was a general agreement on what the safety committee's recommendation was. One concern that was put out there, which many of you might have the same concern, is whether or not there's going to be any penalties if we do not meet that goal of zero fatalities. As far as staff is aware, as far as our consultant is aware, there are no penalties for not hitting zero fatalities. Now, a lot of things can change with new administrations coming in and going out over a long period of time. But at this time, we're not aware of any kind of penalty that would be put on us to not meet that goal. As far as resolution support go, to be eligible for the implementation funding in this grant, the MPO as well as each member government would have to approve a resolution of support that would have that goal year and target in it. Now, there's no reason why the community wanted to, like Des Moines, for example, you've already got a resolution. If you wanted to keep it at 2040, that's perfectly fine. But you would have to at least have to meet that 2045 timeline in that resolution to be eligible for the implementation funding, if that's what we ultimately agree to in the plan. But to be eligible for that funding, you have to have it. So we just want to kind of put on everybody's radar that those resolutions will have to be eventually submitted to the MPO so that we can make sure everybody is eligible. That's my brief update. Happy to take any questions anybody has. I know Lynn is on that committee, so Lynn, if you have any comments you'd like to share as far as if I've represented what was discussed at that committee accurately or not accurately.
Yes, no, it's perfectly fine. And quite frankly, I'm glad to have the opportunity to participate in that. Obviously, my past experience. I think we've actually come a long ways, got a lot of good information out there. That map, I think, was a credible product that came out of that, where everybody was able to focus in on given intersections, locations, and provide comments or suggestions, or to actually know near misses, those kinds of things that I really think brings a lot of things into focus for at least elected officials when they start looking at future CIP projects and areas of concern within their own community. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to obviously get together on a metro-wide basis and share information.
Do we have a control over the penalty issue? So if somebody has a fatality in the community, they're not eligible for the fund. Is that something that we have control over, or is that somebody else?
So I'm not quite sure I understand your question as far as if there's a fatality in the community, you're going to not be eligible for.
Yeah, I'm going back to the whole point I said. There are currently no penalties, and then I think your comments was, however, we're not sure exactly what future administrations will run. You mean outside of this organization?
I'm saying outside of this. I'm saying like at the national level.
For example, if outside of this process, one thing we have to do is there's certain performance targets we have to set. One of them is safety. And currently the way it's set up is the DOT has to set targets. If they don't hit those targets, there's ramifications for their funding, but if the MPO doesn't hit its targets, there's no ramifications for us. And I think the concern is would this be something similar where the feds could come in and say, we're not going to give you rest of the dollars because you're not meeting these targets. And that's what we're saying. As right now, there's nothing like that. But that's not to say the administration doesn't change, Congress doesn't put something new in there that really makes it restrictive.
Well, there's likely nothing we can do about it anyway.
Right. And I would say at that point, we can always amend our plans and goals.
I think from staff perspective, we feel like it's too likely that they would do.
Now, I think this committee, internally, we could set targets. If there's one community that's just doesn't seem to be carrying, sort of like the discussion earlier, could we prevent them from applying? Can the committee consider that in their discussions and decisions and funding? Yeah, I mean, that's always on the table, but from an outside perspective, there's not.
It was really a tough one for me, Doug, that knowing that there's limitations in what we can control. You can't control a kid that jumps on the motorcycle, runs 100 mile an hour in the back end of a van.
Right.
you're going to have some accidents.
People don't pay attention.
For me, the bridge, and Zach helped a lot with that, it's more about the vision. No loss of life is acceptable. The vision is that we have zero. That's the goal. The reality of it is we're probably not going to make that happen. And I think the concern among some of the members was, okay, if we can't prove that up, could we be punished by the federal government saying, oh, but you didn't meet those goals, so now you're not eligible for future funding of some kind? Saying it's a vision, it's where we would like to be. Loss of life is unacceptable is one thing, and then the reality of we're probably still going to lose people.
Commitment to try.
Right, exactly.
I would also note that in this comprehensive safety action plan, there's going to be infrastructure recommendations, but there's also policy, enforcement, education, there's other aspects, hopefully to get us closer to that. And I think I had to leave the meeting earlier, but I think that there was discussion of both in New Jersey as one that's identified this and actually has achieved Vision Zero in the last several years. And that's not a small community, that's a
7 years.
population, but
7 years, no fatalities.
Yeah.
They've had some serious injury crashes. So they track them separately, but no fatalities in 7 years.
And so we'd be happy to try to bring them in on a Zoom or something to hear from their officials, you know, what are they doing, how do they feel about this? That's, keep that in mind, that's what we do as well.
Other questions for that? All right, thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
Move into item 9, which other actions of interest committee and have government.
Just one real quick one, invite you to purchase some swag from the MPO. Something we've typically done just internally, but we've been working with PMM Apparel from Polk City. They've been great to work with, and they opened this up. They also offer, if you want to put your city logo on there, in addition to the MPO logo, that's what they can do as well. So link on the page, but just want to open that up to you.
You. I have one item in Dylan's original contract. We had a 6-month mid-year, or we had a mid-year review, which is coming due at the end of August. There's nothing tied to it other than I want to check in. So I'm proposing, unless people would like to all participate, that just the officers participate in that evaluation, which we could simply do over the phone. But I did want to give the executive committee the opportunity. You guys are definitely welcome to weigh in if you'd like or visit with any one of us, or we could set something up really formal and draconian, or we send out a bunch of questions and give you that opportunity. So I'm requesting input here on how you'd like to proceed in the mid-year review, which is simply something we put in just to touch base.
I completely agree. I think maybe just be welcoming to anybody else's comments or feedback for your consideration.
We are I'm a strong believer in creating a tool that can be used from year to year to year to year. And Dylan and I discussed getting something in place that isn't subject to the whims of the chair or anyone setting that up. So a couple different organizations I've been involved with, we've established a tool. The committees or councils have approved it, and maybe we tweak it every so often. As we continue to try to build up the MPO into a different organization and create this tool so it doesn't change. So that'll be forthcoming for our review in 6 months from now. So we should first get an opportunity to that. There'll be feedback for that, and we can modify that. But moving into a permanent structure, so the executive director always knows what his evaluation will be based.
Yeah.
Does anyone believe we should wait for the policy committee to weigh in on it, or should we get going? I think we could probably do this in a phone call, so we can wait till after next week. It's policy committee, and that way they have an opportunity to email us too.
Right.
This one draw potentially a little behind and happen to stumble upon it. Let's do by August 31st. So. Anyone else have anything of interest with me? Our next meeting is September 11th at 11:30 a.m. Thank everyone for their time and their input and their thoughts today. It is very much appreciated, and we are adjourned.